Hello and welcome back to another episode of Quickfire with maybe, I think, the most exciting news on a Quickfire. I feel like normally it's transfers, and this feels a whole heck of a lot bigger, and not even to mention all the special folks we have here today with us. As always, I'm joined by Tim, but I am going to skip your intro, Tim, because we have the man who, candidly, in the video looks a lot like you, with us here as well. David Goss of Soccerwise fame joining us today. David, thank you for being here. How's the day been for you, man?
Listen, Chicago Fire, built by Bob Bradley, is Bald Mafia home territory. So you're the one who is encroaching on our territory.
That's true.
We're all going to be looking like Greg Broughton or Greg Berhalter pretty soon.
Yeah, the rules are actually changing, guys. You have to be named Greg. You have to be bald. And if you had some stubble, it wouldn't hurt anything either. But it is a joy to be here on a random Tuesday night in June as Chicago Fire have announced a brand new $650 million privately funded soccer-specific stadium that will be built on the 78 in downtown Chicago. Joe Mansueto announcing the news today in a letter with some renderings that he shared on dearchicago.com. I would say, just as a way to kick off, if you haven't read the letter yet, would highly recommend doing so. Really awesome stuff, exactly what you want to see from the mega rich billionaire who owns your favorite sports team. I'll say that much for that. We're going to kind of talk about a few different angles on this, right? I think most importantly is kind of the vibes aspect of it, right? We'll get into a lot of technical details. We'll talk stuff as we go along here. But I think the main thing we kind of started with, right, was this: we have a very big 2025 for Chicago Fire, opening the new training center, the acquisition of Greg Berhalter, a lot of new transfers, and an exciting young team that seems to be trending in the right direction, now being kind of placed with the crowning jewel of this brand new stadium set to open in 2028. Starting there, would kind of love to hear, since we've got you here, David, a little bit of an outside perspective of, we can say the last 12 months at large, but specifically a move like this, where that kind of places Chicago Fire in the in the standing of MLS in North American soccer, right?
It is so hard because it's the whiplash of trying to react now and recalculate from the last 10 to 15 years to what we're talking about. I can't see a world in which you're not talking about one of the premier teams in the league, and you're not talking about a team in which much of what the league does starts to be geared around it. And I'm not just talking about all-star games. I'm talking about primetime games and just trying to push focus and energy around it. Major League Soccer its best product is the in-person experience. And Chicago has not been a part of being able to offer that for a very long time. Some people would argue since previous Soldier Field. I don't know. As someone who grew up going to empty Giant stadiums, I was actually a little jealous of Bridgeview, but clearly that has changed a lot. So I just think when you talk about for people in the market to enjoy the experience and evangelize a bit to get more people into it, and then for people outside the market to look at one of the great cities in the country and one of the great markets and see experiences that look fun and interesting. And I think all of us have power rankings in our head of this team's playing and this team's playing well. They're home, and I know the atmosphere is going to be decent, so I'm going to tune in for that. I think SKC sat there for such a long time. You knew it was going to be high energy and a good crowd, and it would elevate the game a little bit. So I think there's a lot of ways that this shifts stuff, and I think it's been hard for me to just process. I can't imagine for people who are around and actually going to be in it, but it's just hard to process because it's been a slow road under Mansueto of okay, he's got the money, he's got the right ideas. It kept striking out. Greg Berhalter, I think, shifted it for me a little bit over this year. And then you get the Neymar and the De Bruyne rumors, and those start to try and push you in a stratosphere. And I think this is as big as any of those things we're talking about, if not bigger.
Yeah, I think that it just shows how far this team has come. And it sucks that the sporting results haven't been there. But it's sort of it's sort of other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how's the play, right? Because it's everything else has been trending up. It's just wait, you want to go see the team? It's don't they suck? Yeah, but the academy's great now, and they got a great training center. But it's I think he's clearly I think one of the most ambitious owners in MLS at this point. Like, I think it's kind of not, it's hard to sort of like argue against that. Like, you can say like they didn't get Neymar, but like they were actively swinging for Neymar. And I think it's almost like just because they could, the way that Greg was talking about it, it was like the sporting side of what Neymar could bring would have been icing on the cake. And it was sort of like, this will get people to go to the games and have fun. Which is just a different place than we were. And I think that this stadium is, it's like close to an ideal location. And like, there just aren't downtown parcels of land like this open in most cities that are anything close to as dense as Chicago is.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that they were able to get this.
Yeah, it will move to, I think you'll have LAFC, you'll have this. I think Portland will always be what it is because of the history, but it's a way different market. And I think Toronto is one of the big ones. And I think as it expands for the World Cup, it will continue to sort of be in that atmosphere. You have stadiums that are nicer than some of other ones. But I think when you add, proximity to real city and then the quality of the building and the environment it can create and the experience that it can create, I think this is one that you like rocket straight to the top and is a really big moment for the league because the league has been invisible in the biggest markets in the country for too long. LA has fought through. New York's a train wreck. And maybe NYCFC shifts that, but I'm not completely convinced. DC, Philadelphia, it's not big enough. Dallas and Houston, like I didn't even remember to bring up. It's not good enough in a lot of those markets. And I don't think that that's a guarantee. I don't think that it's like, oh, big markets, the league doesn't work because people care about other stuff. You have to put a decent product out there. And I think this is a really fast way to get there.
Yeah, we mentioned a little bit just kind of the slog backup that Joe Mansueto has kind of had to take on since becoming the sole owner in 2019. So a really long uphill climb, Tim. Before this, you and I talked about just kind of grabbing rung after rung on the ladder and just dragging yourself up. And so it does seem not only to be in the conversation for Kevin De Bruyne and like, hey, we offered him a contract. It was Chicago Fire and it was Napoli. And yeah, you lost, but being the last guy in with a real chance to make it happen, I don't think is something to just write off. And I do think from a smaller perspective, and would love your guys' thoughts on this, just what this provides from an actual on-the-field product, not so much for the fan enjoyment, right, but purely for the game. I think looking at what you can offer to the biggest players in the world or guys of that stature when you have the opportunity to not just welcome them into a half-empty Soldier Field, which makes 35,000 people feel like 10,000 people, but your house with your pictures on the wall, your colors everywhere, and kind of what that can do for a recruitment and a growth effort for some of these players.
Yeah, one of the things the team has done with its recruitment of players when they've brought them into Chicago before signing is they take, the team's hotel in Chicago is like a very nice downtown hotel. And they take them there. They like kind of like do the like wining and dining thing. They normally take them to Soldier Field a little bit, and you see the size of it. I mean, Soldier Field is big. It's not a particularly beautiful venue, but it's in a beautiful location. And then I think if they watch game footage, you're sort of like, we'll show you like this Miami game, and we'll show you like the Gold Cup 2019 stock footage, and we're not going to show you any other games.
Yeah,
because it's hard. Even when the Fire have had 30,000 people there, it still feels like an empty building because half the seats are empty. There's no roof. Like being in the press box, people say, like I've heard from so many people, like there's not really a good like supporters culture and stuff like that. It is louder. Like the supporters are louder from the press box than they are when you're in the stands because the sound is literally just going up and out. And the press box, you're up high and kind of like on the way the sound is traveling. So I think that being able to sell them, here's our new $100 million performance center, which like Premier League clubs have toured. And some of them have been jealous, not just of like the size and ambition of it, but like literally individual pieces of equipment that are in there. Like Paul Cadwell was saying, like the like water treadmill thing that they've got, like they had like a Premier League like facilities manager was like, wait, which model is that? Oh, that's the one we wanted, and like that is a nice thing to sell them on. And now you can say, and just a mile and a half down the road, like here is our building, and you take them on a tour and it says the player's name on the Jumbotron and you like do that whole thing. And it feels like it's really theirs as opposed to like, okay, it's cool that my name's in the Jumbotron, but like, what are all these football players doing around on the murals around the facility and stuff like that? Gridiron football players wearing helmets and stuff. And I think that changes. It just makes it an easier sell
Although I think you reach a point where you don't want to sign players who aren't Walter Payton fans, right? Like that's the line that everyone gets quizzed if they're going to get a designated player contract. Somehow Shaqiri passed it. I don't know how. No, I think everything you said, it's so true. And one of the things I think a lot of people forget is like the facilities in Major League Soccer are better than, for the most part, European professional soccer teams, definitely other clubs around the world. The facilities at the average Division I college place in the US are better. Like you hear from all of these. I think Man City was it that had the friendly at Notre Dame last year, and they like could not believe the weight rooms, and they were like going and disappearing because they like could not believe it. So like you already have that leg up and that advantage, but this feels really big and professional. And I think that's like what Tim is saying. Like you can bring players to games. Kevin Denke went to FC Cincinnati games last year when they were recruiting him in the fall. You go into that building, you go into that experience, and you're like, yeah, this is what I want to be a part of. This is where I want to be. People care about this. People are engaged with this. And so to be able to sell that is really big. And then you add in Chicago and everything on top of that, and be able to build a culture and an atmosphere. Like you hear from people who played at Chivas USA when they played in the LA Galaxy's building. So in an MLS building, but not theirs, that they were like, oh, we were visitors. Like we couldn't set our stuff up. Like we couldn't build it out the way we wanted to. Like players couldn't get comfortable and familiar with the surroundings. You lose all these little half advantages that you can have from an on-field point of view. And I think it doesn't feel as big. And so I think this is a setting where if you do this right, there's a potential shift for academy players saying how long they want to be there and what they want to be a part of. Because if you're a Chicago kid, it's like, yeah, I want to play in front of a sold out crowd in Chicago. And when you're 18 or 19, maybe it's not, I have to get out. I think it's definitely a huge step forward in terms of Major League Soccer adding free agency and all the ability for players to move. Because if you're a player now, okay, I get to go live in a major city, but it's not as expensive as New York. I get to play downtown in front of a sold out crowd. Like there is a ton there, which is the core of building a good MLS team, is having those players want to come and not have to overpay them. And I think it then also helps you with the big international recruiting.
Yeah. And I think that one thing the Fire have struggled with is they've had a lot of good academy players that have been in the academy for some period of time. And either they left and like did the stupid thing and went to college. Like they went that route, which you can't blame kids for, and you're always going to lose players of that. Or they sometimes went to like other elite soccer teams around Chicago, or sometimes were poached by other academies and stuff like that. And it was difficult selling them on that whole vision, especially before this year when they were playing out of Bridgeview, which was not anything like a Division I athletic facility. Like the locker room was small. It was built with as few cinder blocks as they could get away with. You kind of felt like a hobbit, like a hobbit habitat with like the height of everything. And Soldier Field, like the locker room the Fire used for it, like everything that is there that has red, that has like the team logo on it, was not there at the beginning of the day, and it will not be there at the end of the day. And you can kind of tell. And I think that affects the way that people feel about the place. So yeah, I think that there are like those are some sporting things that I think maybe went under the radar with some of the discussion on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about things that are right at the beginning of the day and not at the end. I think that's maybe the perfect way to describe the fan experience at Soldier Field. We often joke, I've never been served a Miller Lite at a Fire game, but their logos are all over the stadium, right? You're walking in, you're seeing Bears players on the Jumbotron outside the stadium. They can't even switch it up for the day of. So super exciting from, I think, the fan perspective, right? The supporters perspective, just in terms of what can be offered. The club has talked for a long time about some of the struggles they've faced in terms of really just being able to do whatever kind of programming they'd like, everything from concessions to securities, which have caused a ton of issues. David, I'll kind of toss you. I apologize. I don't know exactly how many times you've been to games at Soldier Field recently, or even Bridgeview back in the day, right? But just, I think maybe a little more well-traveled in MLS than I. Would love to hear kind of that perspective on like your thoughts on kind of what that separation is like for a team that is one of the few still playing in MLS in a football stadium, right? And then on top of that, not a football stadium they own, right? They do think there's a pretty strong distinction there of they don't even wear the same colors the way that the Revs do or Charlotte FC does, right? It's very stark difference from Sunday for the Bears and Saturday for the Fire.
Don't feel too bad. A Revs game is depressing on its own. So even though some of the colors cross over, it's still pretty bad. And I've been to a lot of them, that I can promise. Charlotte has changed things. And obviously Atlanta, right? Atlanta and Seattle playing football stadiums.
They almost don't feel like it, right?
100%. And a lot of that, I would not be shocked if there's a world in which in 10, 15 years, we're talking in the other direction of like, this stadium gets built, it's great, and Chicago Fire grow and grow. And then it's like, oh, is Soldier Field the right move for real reasons? This thing's going to be sold out. Like, people are going to come because it's exciting and it's new. And if they're halfway decent, the atmosphere is going to be incredible, and it's going to be a waiting list to get into this building. And that's how a lot of the MLS stadiums become, which is really cool because people like demand. Like, people think things are cool if they can't get in and they see everyone else going. So just prepare yourself, to everyone out there, for that. But yeah, there's clear feelings. There's operational stuff that goes into it. And then there's that feeling of pride and the feeling of connection and representation. And look at Sporting Kansas City painting the wall, right? That's theirs. It's there. People know it. People want to come and go see it. You start to be able to build out things where you have clubhouses in different spaces. And look at Minnesota United. They've got the beer garden that opens for other games, for non-Minnesota games, and people come and watch, and it's the center of soccer in that area, although Blackheart's the best bar, so I'll throw that out there. Shout out to my guy Wes. People come and watch, right? And the whole point of all of this is like, can you create a central gathering space for the sport, and can it be a point of reference for people? And Bridgeview was never going to be that because it's too far away, and Soldier Field's never going to be that because it's freaking Soldier Field. Like, you could ask someone in East Germany in 1961 what's Soldier Field. Like, they probably have an idea of it. It's one of the iconic stadiums for a whole different reason, and it was never going to be shifted and never going to change. So I think you'll feel it very tangibly, and I've been in markets where the change has happened. Right, I went to Audi Field for the opener. I've been to a number of these stadiums when they open or right around when they open in markets that you thought were dead, that you thought wouldn't have an MLS team that mattered and wouldn't have a feeling amongst the city that it was something that you wanted to be a part of. I would even say I went to the last Nashville game in Nissan Stadium, I think was what it was called. And it was like, okay, this is cool. And then Geodis opens, and like, it's a whole, and all of a sudden my wife went to college in Tennessee. All her friends are like, yeah, we go to every game. Of course. Why wouldn't we go to every game? And like, I don't even know if they could tell you who was on the team 2 years earlier. Like, it really is this galvanizing moment that can happen and change the perception really, really quickly. And then the nice part is we have the proof. Like, it has happened enough times that it's not just me saying, I think this will happen. Like, this is the reality.
And I think what we haven't discussed, right, is there is an aspect of this too, where you talk about kind of creating a central hub, where the idea here is not just a standalone stadium surrounded by 5 miles of parking lot, right? The idea is the Fire are building the stadium to serve as an anchor to a larger...
Man, more Revs just like getting in the crossfire. That's
just American stadium diss. Let's be clear on that, okay? No, but
you could say it's the Boston legacy, too, if you want to. NWSL, whatever it is.
You mean Boss Nation FC? Got it. Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the idea here, right, is to create kind of, I saw somebody refer to it this way, like it's almost kind of supposed to be Wrigley South, right? It's supposed to be this whole kind of downtown-ish area where you have essentially a whole community space, right, of not just the stadium, but bars, shops. Chicago Fire can finally actually have a team store, right? As opposed to a depressing little tent that sits on the concourse at Soldier Field. And actually feel like you have roots and something established in this community and not like you're in a temporary space. I think the one thing we've seen repeated from the club has been a permanent home that no matter what happens, whether this stadium ends up being not big enough, which has been some of the early criticisms of his 22,000 enough space, this is going to be where we are playing our games until the lights turn off. And so, Tim, I'll toss you if you have any kind of details, anything else you want to toss in on that respect. But I think that's one thing we haven't really talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the size thing, like I hear the criticism. I think that a challenge for the Fire has been not how high can the attendance get, and we've seen that, like not just when people think that Messi might or might not be playing, but like, when there's a reason that people are attached to where it brings casual fans into games, because there haven't really been enough sporting reasons for Fire fans to want to go to a Fire game if they're not season ticket holders. And sometimes if they are season ticket holders, there's not enough reasons for them to go to games lately. But I think that nothing that the team has done has really been short-sighted or like lacked ambition. And so I would say that, the plan is going to, the challenge the team has had with attendance has more been getting a good atmosphere and getting people to be excited early in the season when the weather is cold, because, team attendance was as low as like 11,000 people a couple points last year. And it needs to get higher. And I think that's the challenge, not can we get to a really high number? And I think that once that happens, that will sort of be an impetus. And I just can't see the team being content forever with a stadium that has a waiting list out the door. And I don't think, like, one thing Mansueto identified was affordability of some of the tickets. He's like, look, there's luxury boxes and there's going to be inexpensive, affordable seats and everything in between. I just, having spoken to him a little bit about what he's trying to do with the team, I just can't imagine he would be comfortable with a place where, like, families are like, well, do we pay rent or do we take the family to a Fire game? It just doesn't seem like what his plans are for the team.
And I would say 99% of owners, I just wouldn't believe, because they're billionaires and they're pro sports owners. Based off the way this has gone, paying his own money, making it private, like, it feels like Chicago's the one, the Chicago Fire, like the only one where there's a little bit of trust there. And I, without knowing anything about this, can guarantee that there's an ability to expand. Every MLS stadium that's been built has an ability to expand, going back to the days where we didn't even know that it would be necessary. Like, Toronto FC was built and it was like an empty stand. Nothing was permanent. None of the concessions were physically permanent. Everything is basically just being able to be rolled in. It has since then, I think it's been redone, or whatever the process has been to expand it and make it more well built out, I think 4 times, including now for the World Cup, it's going to be 40,000 plus. Every MLS stadium has that built into it because they know that the product is here, but the plan is for it to get there, and you cannot stick yourself in a hole. And maybe the original ones, like FC Dallas, make it harder than it has to be. Hence, we see years of watching, but they also built the Hall of Fame. So that was like a whole nother project that they chose to do inside of your building. So I would be shocked if it wasn't. I wouldn't be surprised, even maybe if they start opening up ticketing early as they start to work on it, maybe they decide very quickly that it's going to go to another number that's not the exact 22,000 that it seems like it is based off today. And some of that comes with other infrastructure work and stuff like that. But I know from being in some of the presentations and whatnot that it's always part of the plan.
Yeah, 100%. And Tim, you even pointed it out earlier today online. It was, you look at the back half of last year, just about every single game from like June on was over 22,000. So to that point, would not be shocked to see that number climb, even as just construction is ongoing. Awesome. Last piece we'll kind of wrap with here, and I think it's just a little bit of interesting talk, and also, selfishly, I just wanted to talk a little ball, maybe. What this kind of does for the pressure and the expectation on Greg Berhalter, right? They've talked a lot of talk. There's been a high level of investment in the first team, even outside of the other investments, right, of the training center and things along those lines, just purely the amount of money being spent on players and the ability to turn over this roster quickly. And kind of what that will set them up for moving into this year feels a little bit like a free roll, right? It's like, hey, improve as much as you can, fight for the playoffs, that kind of feel. And then what that means going into 26, 27 to set yourself up for, hey, our stadium's opening in 2028. We can't show up and be in the race for the wooden spoon come, October, right? So Tim, I'll let you kind of start with that.
I mean, it did occur to me that when we talked to Greg on Thursday for what's normally just kind of like a ho-hum, a couple days before a game presser in the middle of an MLS season, there's definitely going to be, well, one, a lot more people there, and two, a question about if the team needs to win a championship in the year that it opens the new stadium, or something along those lines, just because like it's, you can sort of see the poetry and the symmetry there. I think that it helps on an immediate sense with people inside and outside the club, like from the players to people that are deciding whether or not to go to games, whether or not to like renew season tickets and all that. It gives a clear sort of like next step in the process because I think that the move to Soldier Field could have had that, but then COVID happened and the bad results. And I think now there is a clear thing that everyone should be building towards, and a date on a calendar it's not arbitrary, right? Like, it's like this building is going to open and we want to be at a certain place by that point. And I think that applies for everyone, from like some of the players that are still under contract, like Philip Zinkernagel's on a 4-year deal. Like, will he see it out in Chicago? Nobody knows. But like, as everything stands, like, he would be one of it, potentially the best known and beloved Chicago Fire players at that point on the roster. And where does he want the team to be? And like, where does Christopher Cupps see himself in 3 years? Like, does this make him want to stick around the Fire a little bit longer than maybe he otherwise would? Same thing with like guys like Robert Trudine, who we haven't seen play with the first team yet. So I think that just having that goal and a date on the calendar really is huge.
Important to note, Hugo Kuipers also only has a club option through 2027. So just thought that was worth pointing out.
I think it's one of those where I think actually the timing, the space is good, because I don't think you want to be stuck in like win now mode. Like, I don't think Greg is, as much as you want to get better and improve. And De Bruyne and Neymar would have shifted that, which is why I didn't hate that they didn't happen. I think that this is still like, there's some still work to be done on the back end of the roster of like what you came in and you already had. And I think building the infrastructure of a team, like I just talked about this with someone, what happened to the LA Galaxy being so different from what has happened to the Columbus Crew is because Tim Bezbatchenko built a plan. And as players come in and out, it's all part of this larger plan. And inside that plan, you have a lot of resources. So whether it's players that other people want on good contracts, whether it's academy players that you're pushing through, whether it's good signings that other teams are interested in, like, you have to build that up the same way any American sports team is like, oh, well, we've got picks and we've got talent, and like now we can go do things. And I don't think Chicago's there yet. I believe it will get there because I think Greg Berhalter is really good at what he does and really understands this league. And I think you're already seeing like he's getting production out of a lot of the pieces that maybe people didn't expect. And so maybe that opens up money that you can spend in other ways in other places. And obviously the academy has the success now of selling high-level players, and more money might continue to come through as those players move and you get those secondary deals like we saw with Duran. So I think that 28 is like a good number of, it's 28, right?
Yeah, 2028.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a good number, which is like you have a little bit of time to work. It's not win now, but everything is moving towards that. Everything is moving towards peaking that year. And I think that's a really nice place to be in. And the nature of Major League Soccer is if you build that structure and the team is at a really solid place, yeah, you could drop that cherry on top. And Joe Mansueto could say, I'm opening a new stadium. Tell me what superstar I'm doing it with. And this also will be in the context of post-2026 World Cup, where there might be some characters that have taken over the United States from a commercial point of view and a personality point of view that we're not calculating for. And maybe it doesn't have to be a 37-year-old. And maybe it doesn't have to be someone coming out of something. Maybe it's, I don't know, someone from Ghana who has a great World Cup run and becomes this huge character across the U.S. and whatever. So I think that all can happen, but it doesn't need to happen until 28 in terms of that last piece and that big star. There's a bunch of work that can be done leading into that, which I think Greg is really good at. And I think that's a really good spot for this club to be in.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe that star is a young homegrown goalkeeper who stars for the local side, right? You know, tough to say. Maybe he breaks into the national team at like, I don't know, the Gold
Ryan
Cup.
Gutierrez on a 4-year deal based off my depth charts.
I was talking about Chris Brady, but that's fine.
He will either be around or making a lot more money than he is now, which is hard because he's getting well paid with his U22 deal. So yeah. One or the other.
Wonderful. Awesome, guys. Well, it feels like as good a place as any to wrap up what is maybe the longest quickfire we've done. But David, appreciate you so much joining us tonight. Do you want to let the people know where to find you if they don't for some reason already?
Yes, please listen to Soccerwise. We talk about MLS and NWSL, which is fun half the time for Chicago and unfun half the time for Chicago right now, as often as we possibly can. So Soccerwise, anywhere you get your podcast, Soccerwise HQ, anywhere on social media.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And thank you all who are listening at home right now. If you can, give us a like, subscribe, rate, all that kind of good stuff wherever you're listening to it. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. It's at Men in Red 97 everywhere. You can also follow us on your socials, Men in Red 97 or MIR 97 pods on Twitter. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back this week with another Bonfire preview as the Fire head to DC to take on Christian Benteke, who actually, now that I'm realizing this, we talked about this earlier.
Maybe not.
He's probably not going to play.
We'll find that out. We'll find that out tomorrow. Cliffhanger.
But they are going to be playing in DC on Saturday, and we'll be here to talk about it. So looking forward to having you back for that. Thank you so much for joining us here. Shout out to Austin, our producer, for making us sound good. And come on, you men in red.